Roland Barthes. In French, it is pronounced Barthes. In English, we say Roland Barthes or Roland. D is silent. Roland Barthes, French. In English, we can say Roland Barthes. S is pronounced. French literary critic and semiotician. A caveat before we discuss Barthes. Barthes was initially a structuralist. His approach was a structuralist approach to language and other things. Also a semiotician. Later, he became a post-structuralist or deconstructionist. He extended something, the naturalization of science. So Roland Barthes, one of his initial works, a structuralist work, Mythologies. So in this work, he talks about the principle of myth. What happens? So whenever we say a sign is a conventional one, right? That's how Saussure told us. It's a convention we follow. But Barthes said, after a period of time, when we start using a particular sign, it becomes natural, automatically comes to us. We don't think whether it's a conventional thing or we try to associate. It comes naturally to us, right? Whenever we think of a sign, immediately we connect the tree with the tree, right? The reader to consume myth innocently. Our language or myth, we consume innocently, then we understand, doesn't see it as a semiological system. So unless we study semiology, we take language for granted. For apart from literature students, other students, tree is a tree. If I ask a student of computer or another student, hey, tree, that's actually a sign. This tree represents, then definitely the girl or guy will say, this guy has gone mad, right? So there are readers who consume myth innocently, language innocently. We are not aware that it's actually a semiological system. We take it for granted. It's a natural one for them. The signifier and the signified, in his eyes, a natural relationship. This happens. Do you think all the time when I say cat, dog, it's a semiological system? No, we don't do that. So after a period of time, it's become a natural relationship for us. So this process is called naturalization of science. So this is talked about by Roland Barthes. Then he came up with this very beautiful book. So when we discuss Roland Barthes as a structuralist, you have to start with this book, Elements of Semiology. So here he talks about and elaborates on Saussure's idea. So he talks about signifying systems. Why Roland Barthes is important? Because earlier we talked about Saussure, then we have Prop, then we have Lévi-Strauss. Now Roland Barthes taking structuralism to other signifying systems like garment, fashion, food, car, furniture. And he said, why should we restrict semiology to linguistics or anthropology or myth? We can also use semiology to understand everyday science. So that is a contribution by Roland Barthes. So there exists a general category, Lang and Parole, which embraces all system of science. So take clothes for that matter, garment. See, when we think of garment, we know, but the moment we say garment, so it depends on your gender. I'm a boy, if you are a girl, then there are different signs. I go for different clothes, you go for different clothes. So that is my parole. When we say garment in general, that is competence or Lang. My choice, even choice, one day if I go for a traditional dress, maybe vesti sata, or other day I go for pant or maybe jeans if it's cold or kind of fashion, or checked shirt or a t-shirt. So that is parole. So Barthes said, even in our everyday life, we have this Lang and parole. Then the food system. Food, we'll discuss food in the next slide, but even food, we have the competence, a lot of food available. But every day, what are you going to cook today? So that is parole. Similar way, car, what car or what type of a car, furniture or furniture system, or what type of a piece of furniture are you going to buy? So each and everything has a Lang, a kind of a collective. From that, we choose a particular one for our taste, for our home. So this is by Roland Barthes. This is a significant contribution, expanding structuralism to everyday things. And this is a famous illustration. This is often talked about. The food system, he talks about the menu card, menu. So a menu is actually the illustration of language and speech. Here, the language represents land, speech represents parole. For instance, this is his idea. He says any menu is concocted with the reference to a structure. So how do you prepare a menu? So you go to a hotel, an established one, where you ask for a menu. So if you go for Goa, they give the traditional food. Or if you go to a bar, then they have certain menu. So it can be national, regional, or social, depends on the structure, right? And we have a certain land. But in Europe or in Western, whenever you go to a hotel, every day they come up with a different menu, right? Not the same food, maybe morning, afternoon, evening, even here. So menu, the combination differs from the period, which period of the day, or from day to day. But it has everything. I mean, the menu has everything, but depends on the period or your own choice. So how are you going to choose? I don't think every day you go to visit. If you visit a hotel, you go for a same combination. So maybe one day you go for biryani, even biryani you go for different combination. So menu, even studying menu is a semiological one. So that is by Barthes. So that is how Barthes is, as a structuralist, is very important. Then Barthes came up with literature. So he said, let's expand this semiotic linguistics to literature, especially text. So he came up with these two terms, legible and scriptable. Scriptable, L-I-S-I-B-L-E, then S-C-R-I-P-T-A-L-E. Script means writing, right? Legible, more listening or reading. So translation, legible, readerly text, scriptable, writerly text. So in this famous work, S by Z, we will discuss this book in a separate class. I'm planning a different lecture on intertextuality, a separate lecture on intertextuality, where we will discuss this book in a separate class. But S by Z is one of his famous books. In this book, he introduced these two terms, readerly text, writerly text. When we say readerly text, a text where you take things for granted. Readers are passive consumers, like any classic text for that matter. If there is an omniscient narrator, we follow that story, that's all. Our contribution is less. Writerly text, like a writer, you also contribute. Script, you also script a story. We become active participants. There are challenges given to us, a puzzle to solve, and we actively participate in reading. So this is writerly text, any postmodern text for that matter. Okay, so these are some of his concepts. Then the same work, S by Z, he came up with 5 codes in a particular text. Take any text, you can find these 5 codes. So first one, pro-eretic, A-I-R-E-T-I-C. What is pro-eretic? Pro means a forward, right? Pro-eretic refers to the sequence of actions. So take any text, there should be actions or scenes, a series, right? It has something to do with the plot, storytelling, not a chronological way of telling, how you arrange the scenes or actions. So that is pro-eretic. So any text, something to do with the plot, that should be there. Then semantic or semic. So semantic meaning, the meaning of words, phrases, expressions, or the recurrent connotations or themes. So any text, if you take a story, there are themes that come again and again. So in literature, the famous motif, right? We have a lot of motifs. One, seize the day or some other thing. So we have recurrent connotations. We identify them or meanings, right? Then any text is a representation of a particular culture. So that is a cultural code, third code. The cultural code demands the knowledge of a particular culture or society. So if you say, I'm going to read a novel in a particular, if in an African community, then when we read that novel, we are kind of a stranger to that novel, right? Then by and by, now things fall apart. Everyone understands because it's prescribed and we get to know that Igbo society, right? Or else it's tough to read that text, Chinua Achebe's text. Then fourth code, hermeneutic code. Hermeneutic, something with interpretation, right? Hermeneutics, there is a separate field within criticism. We'll talk about hermeneutics and phenomenology in the upcoming classes if we have time. So when we say hermeneutic, within a story, we have some mysteries. There are a lot of questions. So when we read a story, we have a lot of questions. What happened? What's going to happen? So that kind of a question. So when we finish that story, the questions are answered. The mystery is solved. Okay. Then finally, the fifth code, symbolic. So there are a lot of elements, symbols in terms of dreams, fantasies, metaphors, metonymies in a particular text. So we have to find the logic behind them, symbolic meanings. So these are the 5 codes identified by Barthes in S by Z. Then in his another book, Image, Music, Text. In this book, you have this chapter called From Work to Text. Similar way, it's like readerly and writerly. So work is more readerly, that which is consumed passively by the readers. But when we say text, I'm going to read this text. The text is that which demands an active participation of the readers, something like scriptable. Okay, word is different, but when we say text, text is for interpretation. It needs your participation. Work is something else. So that is the differentiation between work and text. Then these are some of his famous work. Writing 0 degree. We will discuss the death of the author, because where Roland Barthes is no longer a structuralist, he becomes a post-structuralist. Then the pleasure of the text. When you read a text, you get different pleasures. One ordinary pleasure, another bliss, a kind of a joyance. Then we'll try to discuss this work, textual analysis of Edgar Allan Poe's short story, Valdemar. Then Empire of Signs, another famous work. Then a lover's discourse fragments. So these days, you get questions. On the one side, they give you a list of critics. On the other side, they give their famous works. So at least if you know, okay, the pleasure of the text, Roland Barthes, or at least you can guess, Roland Barthes is known for interpreting everyday signs. So here is a book, Camera Lucida, Reflections on Photography. So he already discussed food system, car system, and other systems. Why not photography? He is the god. So sometimes if you cultivate that instinct, definitely you can answer tough questions at exam.